Welcome. This is Jean Maroney of Thinking Directions. And today I'm offering a free call on set goals that motivate. This is an incredibly important topic. And of course, it's very timely since many people are setting goals for 2025, which starts in 2 days, just coming right up here. And the reason I give this class is that I have a different perspective on goals than most people. Uh, a goal is an intention you set to achieve a particular outcome. It's something that you decide you're going to do. It would not happen if you didn't if you didn't decide to do it. It would not happen, right? If you didn't decide to put in effort over a period of time, it wouldn't happen. It's an outcome that wouldn't come to pass without your intentional effort. When you set a goal, you're going to change the status quo. Whatever your life is like right now, when you set a goal, you're actually making a change in your life. And so it's the essence of all growth, the essence of all creation, the essence of all development, the essence of all productiveness involves setting goals and creating results as a result of those goals. So if you want to live a happy life, setting and achieving goals is absolutely essential to it. It's achieving the goals that gives you the joy in your life. It's the confidence that you can achieve goals that contributes to the happiness. It's the pride in having achieved them and knowing that that you've done what you intended to do that contributes to your happiness. And that's one integrated result. Happiness is one integrated result. Achieving goals is an important part of it, but making sure that you set the goals in a way that actually contributes to your happiness is not well understood. And that's why this course is on setting goals that motivate, because that is the critical thing that people don't understand. Now, before we really get into a lot of details here, I just want to say this is a teaser for the launch call, right? This is a teaser. I start on January 1st on Wednesday. I'm starting an 8-week program. It's called Launch. The subtitle is Achieve a Major Goal in 8 Weeks. And it's a coaching program where there are 2 coaching calls a week and there's daily thought work. And on the first day, on New Year's Day, we have what's called a thinking day, where I'm actually available for coaching a total of 4 hours between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. that day, so that everyone who's starting the launch can get coaching on setting their goals. And the coaching is to make sure that the goals they want to achieve in their 8 weeks will motivate them. And then the coaching is to help them problem solve to make sure they actually take the actions to achieve the goals. And that's that if you get inspired by this and you have a goal that you want to set, I'll tell you a little bit more about the launch toward the end. But I just want to tell you, I'm telling you everything in this class, everything about how I coach people to make sure their goals are going to motivate them so they actually achieve a major goal in 8 weeks. I'm not ignoring anything that I don't use to coach them. I'm going to give you all the theory here. So that's what the plan is for today. We're going to go for about an hour with essentially theory. Now, if you have a question, if I say something that's unclear, please put a note in the chat and I will try to answer it. I'm going to try to save questions until after we do, in effect, the presentation portion. And then at the top of the hour, I will open it up for any questions, any coaching on any goals you have, any questions about the class. Clarity questions I definitely want to get while I'm talking about it. Comments and things, we can do that all after the main presentation. So I hope you guys are all in the right place and are getting excited for 2025. So as I said, I think this is an incredibly important topic. Lots of people talk about goals. I don't agree with the way that they talk about them. They talk about SMART goals, SMART goals. And this is so commonplace at this point. You can even get infographics that have them. I didn't have to make this infographic. I just got it off a Adobe stock, right? S is for specific, M is for measurable, A is for achievable, R is for realistic, T is for timely. And, you know, there is, I mean, SMART goals aren't crazy. There's a reason people use them. If you use these criteria for goals, it will work if you're very motivated for the goal and you actually know exactly what you need to do to achieve the goal. But a lot of goals that you have are actually more difficult than that. And this is particularly if you're setting goals for yourself. If you're setting goals for yourself, this standard will not cut it because you need objective goals that are going to factor in both facts, right? So it does need to be specific and measurable so you can tell if you've actually achieved it. It does need to be achievable. It can't be, you know, you can't have your goal be data Martian. As far as we know, there aren't any Martians. That would be really not an achievable goal. The difference between achievable and realistic has always escaped me. This is so that they can get the acronym SMART, let's face it. And timely or time limited, or there are about 7 different things for the T, all involving that there needs to be a time element for the goal. And that's true too, because if you don't, you want to make sure that you're focused on getting a result in a delimited amount of time. That actually is very important for making sure you set the goal right and that you're motivated enough. So it's not that these are irrelevant, but the thing they leave out is your values. The absolute critical thing to achieving a goal is that you are motivated to take the steps. And that depends on your values. And that doesn't show up here in any of SMART. And that's why I'm on a campaign to teach people a different way to set goals. The goal needs to not just guide action, it needs to motivate action. It's all about the action. All of your results come from, in fact, doing the work. So that is the critical thing. All objective standards for goals, they need to both guide and motivate action. And I've got several different standards for this. 3 criteria, really. So one is the outcome needs to be out there in the real world, not in here in your mind. So we're going to talk about a number of different goals. But you know, sometimes people have a goal that's a learning goal. Like I want to get, like I've actually had a kind of learning goal. I've wanted to learn to essentialize. That's something I've worked on for a long time. But that's in my mind. And I'll tell you, it's impossible to set a goal to essentialize, to learn how to essentialize without having something out there in the world. So I started by learning how to essentialize written material. There are actually 3 classes in the Thinking Lab, you know, my membership program that most of you probably know about. And if not, you've been getting emails about it recently. There are 3 classes on that. One is about essentializing written material. That's like the easy way to learn. One is about concretization. That turns out to be a very important way to learn how to essentialize when a lot of things are in your head. And the third is definitions. Definitions require essentializing a body of knowledge and really organizing it. And those are some basics, but other times that I've tried to pursue that goal, I've need to have it in terms of, say, making a clear outline for a class or essentializing a particular class. There needs to be something out there in the real world. It's true that I'm getting better at essentializing, and it's true in some vague way I have a goal of getting good at essentializing. But the actual real goals that I set concern making this class essentialized, or this article essentialized, or this task. And that is very, very important. This is an issue of objectivity. You can't really judge what the state of your mind is. You know, you can't like have a scope go in and see, have you learned this, right? You can't just tell whether you've made a real change in your mind. I've actually made some motivational changes in my life. And one of the ways that I've determined that I changed them is my response to certain fiction has changed over decades. But that's something you can't like plan on. And with a goal, it needs to be something actionable where you can see results, because a goal needs to guide you. So it needs to be something in the real world that you can look and see, am I getting to where I'm trying to go? And part of the creativity in setting a goal is figuring out how to, when you have kind of an airy-fairy nebulous goal, how do you turn that into something that is in fact meaningful out in the real world? Second criteria. So that's about facts. Has to be something that has to be out in the real world, facts that you can judge so you can really see your progress. Second criteria, achieving that goal has to have a payoff. A payoff. This is such an important idea. I've gotten this, there's a book called The Payoff Principle that a friend of mine wrote that I learned a lot from. His name's Alan Zimmerman. And the thing I really took from that is every time you are trying to do something, you need to know the payoff. And what that is it's some deeply meaningful value. Not just that you hope you're going to get, but that you're contextually certain you will get. And this takes work because, like, for example, if you set a money goal, like, gee, I'd like to, if you have your own business, I'd like to double my sales next year. Yeah, sure, that would be really exciting, but are you really contextually certain you know how to do that? If not, it's not going to actually motivate you properly. It needs to be something that you can see, I see how to get that. And then the confidence that you believe you can get that is what then motivates the action. And that's, with money goals, particularly like me, money was not my primary motivation in starting my business. I've had to develop an interest in making money, which is, a whole other story here, right? But it wasn't meaningful to me. And as a result, it was difficult to set money goals. That's changing, but the test is right now, if you are setting a goal for you, it needs to have a payoff that is meaningful for you. A lot of times people want money because it's going to give them something else. And there, it's actually important to set the goal in terms of what it is you really want instead of in terms of the money, because that's what's in fact going to motivate the action. Yes, you will probably make money en route, but you need to have it, you need to be clear on where you actually get the motivation from. There are other problems with money goals that we'll talk about separately. Okay. The third thing is it needs to be relatively clear-cut, doable, and important. And this is something, I didn't literally put every word on the handout on the slides, but and this is one of the places that I left out some words. The exact standard of how clear-cut, doable, and important it needs to be depends on the time scale. And that's really important. That's what I really want to focus on. This is the thing that is just, when people talk about SMART goals, they just don't talk about this. The standards are different depending on the time scale. And the first time scale I want to talk about, since it is the beginning of 2025 in 2 days, in case you didn't notice, is long-term goals. Now, I mean by a long-term goal, a goal that takes longer than a year, right? And if you have a goal that's that long-term, it can be fairly abstract. So I have now some big money goals for my business, and it's actually kind of vague how I'm going to get them. And it's not related to that. It means that I don't have a clear path to success. With a long-term goal, what you need most is not the specific, measurable, attainable criteria. What you need most is that the long-term goal be personally meaningful, that it's tied to deep rational values, that there is, you see it as important to your life and who you are as a person. So I'm just, to make this non-mysterious, my long-term money goals concern getting my ideas out there. I mean, I really think this is this goal setting class. This isn't my only class, but I think this is the best approach to goal setting. I think people are way more successful when they use this goal setting. I need to get this out to more people. And what is an objective measure of that is the money that I make. And it's because I want to get it out to more people that it is personally meaningful to me now to set a money goal. Now, this is something like with an exercise goal or a weight loss goal. Like, let's take weight loss because that can be a really long-term goal. If you have a lot of weight to lose, it may be something that's just not practical to lose it in a few months. It may be that you need to think in terms of a year. And that's actually also very consistent with the fact that to keep weight off, typically you need to actually change your diet and you need to have a diet that you like. And in these cases, like with weight loss, it often is not clear what the path to success is, particularly if you've tried. To do this and you've had trouble with it. And there, it's very important that there be a personally meaningful reason that's tied to values. A lot of times, let's take again weight loss goals, or we have someone in the chat, fat loss goals. Sometimes these are not tied to values. They're tied to, oh, I look so awful. They're tied to self-criticism, right? And it's actually very important. I'm going to talk about this some more as we get toward the end. One of the most important things about goal setting is that you make sure that it is oriented to values. And that's what makes it meaningful. If you have any kind of self-criticism built into your goal, it is not going to work. You need to do some introspection and you need to do some turning of that around. Anytime there's something you want to avoid, it's because there's some value that is being threatened by this. And what you need to do is figure out what that is. So like for a weight loss goal, it could actually be a social goal. It may be that you in fact want a romantic partner and you think you have to lose weight or change your body to get a romantic partner. Much better to set a social goal of finding a romantic partner and let the weight take care of itself. It's actually much more effective, much more likely to work. Sometimes people have a weight loss goal because of health. Now there, it's probably very important to figure out what would better health get you, because health can be very, very vague. I mean, it's bizarre, right? Health actually, I think, probably should be, everyone over about 40 probably needs to have health as their top value. Under 40, you can kind of get away not worrying about health. But over 40, it starts to become an issue. And but it's so vague, right? It's so vague. You need to make it personally meaningful. And I think sometimes you do. Like for me, the way I set health goals is I had a really big health problem when I was, well, let's see, I guess I was 43. And I lost almost a year of work due to Epstein-Barr, which is like one of the chronic fatigue type diseases. And boy, I never want to have that again. But I really saw how empty my life was without work. And so I really want to be able to maintain a productive undertaking. So health really means something to me as a result of that incident. But if you haven't had something like that, you need to figure out why it's personally meaningful. Very important. Or else you're not going to be able to figure out how to get payoffs on the shorter term goals that are necessary to achieve that long-term, maybe somewhat vague goal. And again, if you have any questions about this, go ahead and put them in the chat. Now the second, oh, I see, you know what, I can fix this right now. I can put in a closed parentheses here. There, that meets my need for grammar. An objective is the next shortest goal. That's from like 1 month to 1 year. And I'm actually using the OKR terminology here. Some of you may know about objectives and key results. This has been very popular in a number of entrepreneurial businesses. And I don't have exactly the same take on it as people who do official OKR, but my views align with this. So I would say objectives are 1 month to 1 year. Typically, they have them for, well, I'm not going to tell you more about OKR. Objectives usually I mean, sometimes there's a standalone objective that's just really important. So for example, there was a gala for my husband in June, and I had some projects associated with that. I was involved in getting the entertainment and getting a video about his achievements created. And those were short-term, shorter term goals, like a month, each of them, that I was all in on. And they were motivated because I really wanted this gala to be fantastic. So they weren't tied to a longer term goal. But typically, what objectives are is they're the way that you break down this vague, abstract, long range goal into something that you can work on this month or this quarter. And so it kind of objectives fill in from 1 month to 1 year. And so typically they get their meaning from the long range goal that they are substantially advancing. Now they need to be, so long-term goals can be kind of vague and you're not sure how to get there. Objectives, you need to see that there will be a significant payoff and you think it's likely you can achieve it in that time. So they need to be a lot more tied down than long-range goals. And this is part of the bridge. How do you take a long-range goal and turn it into something that you can really see is going to move forward? So let's just take a case like, for example, if you have a weight loss goal, it may be that your first objective is to find a diet that you can stand, that you think you could actually stay on. Right. And that might be a month or maybe even a quarter of experimenting with different diets until you found a diet that you thought, yes, in theory, at least, this diet could help me lose weight and I'm willing to do it. Ginger says it's difficult to identify whether your goal is avoidance or value motivated. I don't think it's so hard. If you put some in the chat, we can talk about them, Ginger. But let's talk about it with like, and maybe that's because I'm using weight loss as an example. With money goal, like for me, I have a money goal. What's my objective? My objective is actually to get some processes in place. I don't have the processes in place to track how I'm getting people in and which promotions are successful. Okay, I realize this is like business 101, but that's where I am. Now, do I think that this is going to really help the long-term goal? Absolutely. Is there a significant payoff? Yes, I'll start to actually see how successful things are. Now, in that case, I'm not doing this from, oh no, I'm ignorant, I don't know what's going on. I'm doing this from, oh, I see, I really want to know that and that and that. Those are values that I can gain. Same thing with like some of you have intellectual goals. Some of you wrote to me in advance with some goals. If you have, like, I have a book goal too. And the first objective typically is to get, some kind of an outline done, right? That's not typically something you can do in a couple of days. Typically, that's going to take a few weeks to get an overview of the whole book and what you think is going to be going into the book, right? Once you have a draft, you might have, depending on where you are, the objectives always start from wherever you are and move you toward the goal. And so that's one of the reasons they're also shorter term, is that wherever you are, you need to figure out what's the next chunk that you're going to get done. Okay. Okay. Now we get closer in to key results. I think this is the critical thing. And this is not exactly how OKR people talk about it, but I think the critical thing for a key result, this is something that you can get done in less than 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks. I think this is absolutely objective. I adapted this from one of my mentors when I was still an engineer many years ago. I was working at a small observatory at Curlin Air Force Base. We were doing field experiments in ground-based laser adaptive optics, a laser guide star adaptive optics. And we did it, we got this system up, we got the first system working on this. And it was hard. It was very hard. It took longer than it expected. We had a lot of setbacks. And the person in charge of it, his name is Bob Fugate, really just a hero of mine. And he realized from talking to the engineers, he realized when he asked the engineers how they were doing on whatever thing they were working on, if they said, oh yeah, or he says, when are you going to get done? If they said something less than 2 weeks, it meant it was going to get done pretty darn soon. If they said 2 weeks or more, it meant they didn't know. There is some limit to how much you can get your head around about how much work you can do in a given amount of time. And I think it's also, it's about 2 weeks that you can really say, oh yeah, well, in the next 2 weeks, I have 2 doctor's appointments and, there's no holidays. So I have normal work week, and so I can get this much work done. When you get off to a month, you just can't in your head have a sense of how much work you can do. And so there's a real objective limit of 2-week key results. And this is one of the things I do with people in launch. However long range their goal is, and people come into launch with, goals that they don't expect to get done in 8 weeks. But they want to get it on a roll, and they want to start seeing results, and they want a major result in 8 weeks, even though the whole goal is not going to be completed, like a book. That would be an example. But I always make them bring it down to something that they can achieve in 2 weeks. And that needs to be clear-cut, doable, and important, which is my version of SMART, right? Clear-cut, doable, and important. You don't need to learn an acronym. It needs to be absolutely clear what you're trying to get done in the 2 weeks. It needs to be absolutely doable. And it needs to be really important. And so logically, this was definitely going to contribute to the objective. What I always say is it's got to have something where you really feel like, oh my God, if I could get this done in 2 weeks, this would be amazing. You need to be like excited about, oh yes, for the big goal, if I get this done, like for me with trying to get some things in place. I actually have not set my 2-week goal for the first 2 weeks in January, but I guess I should try to do that here off on the fly. It's going to be something about, it's going to be some part of my website I'm going to be able to start to track, and I'm going to be able to start to see what happens. And I'm going to pin that down to get this, to figure out what this goal is. And that's going to be very exciting because I'm going to actually start building into my system, actually looking at these results on a daily process. And that I know is going to make a difference. I know, they say, what you look at is what you get, right? If you don't monitor progress toward the goal, you can't achieve the goal. And so I know that that's part of what I need. Now, with the key results, very important, it has a payoff. It's very important that you're actually excited about getting this done. That you see, like for me, if I have the objective is to put in some measurements, tools, metrics, so that I can actually track things. Here I've got, I can get the first one in here. This is going to be great. It's got the same value of being able to monitor, being able to see progress as the longer term objective. But sometimes the 2-week goal doesn't actually get the same value. Like the example I gave with the diet, where I said maybe an objective would be to find a good diet. Well, maybe your 2-week objective is to experiment with a diet and see what you like and don't like about it. Now, how do you make that have a payoff? You might not like the diet, right? It might not cause you to lose weight. So how are you going to get a payoff from that? Well, one way that one person in the launch did it was actually take advantage of interest in finding interesting menus. So this person went and did research and found interesting menus to try out a particular diet and see. And so the payoff was from the kind of fun of trying new recipes and doing the research for the recipes. And it didn't matter if the test was, no, I don't want to go on this diet. It happened to be the Mediterranean diet. It didn't matter if it turned out that in the end, she didn't want to go on it. She would still actually get a payoff from those 2 weeks. And that is so important to see that this is moving forward, and that no matter what, you are going to get some joy out of putting in this work. That is really critical. That is really critical. That takes some creativity. This gets back to Ginger asking about identifying whether a goal is avoidance or value motivated. You can tell, I mean, in order to be creative, it's got to be value oriented. It's just got to be value orienting. And it needs to be important to you so that you get excited. Paula says, making a KR seem amazing. That sounds like a new formulation. Okay, we'll say it's a new formulation. I'll add it to the chart next time. It's got to be amazing. So let me just say, it's the 2-week key results that really move you toward your long-term goals. This is the most important thing, is setting your 2-week goals. That then is going to get broken down into things that you do on a given day. And I break it down into a task. A task is only, say, 2 to 3 hours. And there's a real limit on tasks also. Tasks need to be short enough that you can do them in one burst of effort. And, you know, you really shouldn't sit at a task more than 2 or 3 hours. You actually probably shouldn't sit more than a half an hour. And there's a limit to how long you can concentrate at a time before you need a half an hour break. I mean, for me, it really is around 2 hours. I can do about 2 hours of concentrated thinking at a time. Then I need about a half an hour break. So a task is something self-contained that you can actually do in a burst of effort. And, you know, there are people who actually advocate just, I mean, there's a particular person, I'm not going to mention his name, who the way he gets really big projects done is he clears everything out and he does nothing but that one project nonstop, working Herculean days and nights until it's done, and then he crashes. Okay. And he recommends that. Now, some people like that. And it is true that if you clear the decks and you don't have to do anything else, you can get amazing things done when you just ignore everything else and focus on one thing. But that is not practical for most of us who have a life and who actually, you know, want to do something in the evening other than work. Or like me, I mean, I schedule classes, I schedule all kinds of things. I schedule meetings with my assistant. You know, I need to fit the work. I block out time for work, but I need to fit it in time blocks. And so most people need to fit their work into time blocks. And I recommend that 2 hours is a real typical amount. I say less than 2 or 3 hours. 3 hours, I think, is a real absolute limit for a task. What do you need for a task? A task is also a kind of goal. So my goal today, like if you have a to-do list and you have a few things you want to get done, those are typically tasks that you can get done in a burst of effort. Obviously, they need to, sometimes they are ends in themselves. Sometimes they are ends in themselves. I have some financial paperwork I need to fill out that's going to take a half an hour. And it's, you know, it's an end in itself. But like, you know, making the slides for this was a task, which was a means to giving this call. So most of them are necessary to achieve the key result. But even so, every task has to have a payoff. Every task has to have a payoff. At every level, the objective has to be wildly meaningful to you. Excuse me, the long-term goal needs to be wildly meaningful to you. The objective needs to be really deeply meaningful to you and tied into your values, and ideally connected to something you're passionate about, right? The key results, you need to be amazed. Oh my God, this would be great. And tasks, you need to at least have a deep sense of satisfaction when you get them done. And not just by checking the box. I mean, I know people who used to put items on their to-do list so they could check the box. Checking the box is great, but the task actually has to have some payoff. Like for me, the payoff of making the slides is it makes this presentation a little more professional, and it gives you something interesting to look at other than just my face as I'm talking here. It gives my notes. I don't have to put on my glasses and read the handout. So it's like, okay, yes, this is a task. It has a payoff. Sometimes the task has a payoff that's a collateral gain. I think that it's part of the creativity in figuring out how to break things into tasks is you figure out how to make some kind of collateral gain. Like if you have a really boring task, like you literally need to, crunch some numbers or like organize something, like for your taxes, say. Taxes is a great one. A great one that you need to transform into a value-oriented, which definitely takes some creativity. But, it's not that fun. So what do? You need to find some way to make the task actually have a payoff. So for me, a lot of times, part of the payoff is tidying up. I like having my desk be neat. And so I'll bring the stuff out and make a mess of it. And then part of the payoff is I get to neaten it up. Or another way you can actually build in entertainment. Like you can listen, if it really doesn't take much mental space, you can build in listening to a podcast you like listening to, or music or something like that, so that you actually get some entertainment or some education as a collateral gain for doing the task. Every task you do needs to be motivated, and figuring out how to motivate that, or has to have motivation, has to be something that you can get yourself to say, yeah, I think I want to do that. Every single task. Very, very important. And that's, really, that's the key. Now we get down to finally now, right? The final thing we've broken down the time to closer and closer and closer to right now. We've finally gotten to steps. A step is what you do right now, right? In the next 1+ minute. So it's the first step of doing the taxes, or the first step of figuring out what the metrics are, or the first step of choosing a diet that you're going to try, or finding a recipe to investigate. And the critical thing about a step is it has to be something that you can do now with no additional preparation. It is completely under your volitional control. And it's a step. It's only a step if it's actually logically necessary to complete a task. Steps make up tasks. Tasks make up key results. Key results make up objectives. Objectives make up long-range goals. That step, it needs to be possible to do now, and it needs to be easy enough that you are willing to do it. I have a whole class on what I call self-direction. I am opposed to both self-indulgence and self-discipline. I do not think you should wait until the spirit moves you. That would be self-indulgent. And I do not think that you should pressure yourself and force yourself to take steps. That's self-discipline. There is an alternative, which is self-direction, which is you're willing to take the step. You're not going to pressure yourself. There is going to be contrary motivation. Usually the reason people use self-discipline is they feel a little bit torn in two different directions, and they think they need to cut that out. They need to just block that out and make themselves just focus on the thing they're supposed to do and take that step. And it is true, often that will get you over the hump and you will get the task done. But sometimes it won't. And when it doesn't, it fails completely. Same thing with self-indulgence. Self-indulgence is you wait, well, I remind myself, yes, I wanted to do this. And you see if the spirit moves you. And, sometimes that does get you over the hump, just thinking about why, oh, yeah, I guess I'm willing to pull out those taxes right now or whatever it is. Sometimes that will work. But if it doesn't, it totally fails. Right? What self-direction is you come and you say, okay, I'm not going to pressure myself. There is contrary motivation. It's okay that there's contrary motivation. It's okay that this particular step may not have a payoff. I've got a payoff in the next couple of hours. Say, all of this is okay. I'm going to take the step as a matter of pride. I'm focused on the payoff. I can do this. I am willing to do this, even though it's uncomfortable. And the reason this is, if you want to ask about this, we can talk about this in the Q&A. I can talk about this topic for a long time. The way you do that is by letting yourself be vulnerable and feel the emotions as you take the step. Because what happens is when you take the step, it becomes clearer why there's contrary motivation. And either it's just old baggage and is really irrelevant, or in fact, there's an issue that you need to address. And the easiest way to find out what the problem is to let yourself be vulnerable, feel the contrary motivation, feel the fear, and do it anyway. That's actually the name of a book. So Audrey says, so essentially long-term goals which have a payoff ultimately need to consist of steps that may not have an obvious payoff. No, long-term goals need to consist of objectives which have huge payoffs, which have key results, which have amazing payoffs, which have tasks which have good payoffs, and those steps, any particular step may not have a payoff, right? So you need to be able to keep taking the steps, knowing that you've done enough thinking so that you're going to get a payoff, in the process of doing this task, which is less than 2 hours, may only be a half an hour task. In this task, you are going to get a payoff. So this is a short enough time scale that you can go on a promise. What I don't want people to do is say, well, in the future, if I do this in 10 years, it's going to be amazing. So let me just slog away for 10 years. That is the opposite of my point of view. I'm not saying that's what you meant, Audrey, but I want to make sure that I've made it very clear that that's not what I'm recommending. I'm recommending that you always see where the next payoff is coming, and that in fact, you always see a payoff within the next couple of hours. And in fact, I think the longest you should, okay. Okay. Sounds like that was clear. Okay, good. So that's the main thing I do, is coach people to figure out what that is. And as I said, shortly, we're going to switch to coaching, and you guys are going to bring me your goals, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to do that on real cases. I just want to give you a little bit more on the theory of how do you get the payoffs, because it's all about the payoffs. And I've got 4 tips for you on the payoffs. And the number one thing is this that I mentioned earlier, is the value orientation. You need to describe all the goals in terms of values gained, not threats avoided. Now, Ginger said this can be difficult. And the reason it can be difficult is that it takes introspection to figure out what your values are. You need to be able to have emotions, both positive and negative emotions, figure out where they come from. And if some of them are focused on threats, so like let's say a money goal, right? Suppose that you want more money because you're worried about you're tight for money, so you're worried about paying the rent, right? And so it's like, oh my God, I could get evicted if I don't pay my rent long enough. Or, let's just take that. It's a little bit of a canned example, but let's take it. So the most obvious thing to you is, I could get evicted. This would be terrible, right? What you need to do is really figure out what would be so terrible about that. Now, there are a lot of things terrible about that. So part of the reason it can be difficult to figure out the values is because your result is, well, it's obvious it's terrible. Why do I need to explain that? You need to explain that because it's terrible for different people for different reasons. So I'm going to give you 3 possible reasons someone might think it would be terrible to get evicted. So one person might think it's terrible for purely social reasons. And I'm not saying this is a good reason, but so they'd be embarrassed because, people would lose respect for them because they can't manage their money or something like that. Now, this is still negative, right? You're going to actually, if that's what the first line of the onion is, the first peel of the onion is, you're going to need to go again. And why would you be embarrassed? Why is being embarrassed? Why is their thinking that you don't have your act together a bad thing? Well, I really want to have my act together. I really want to be able to have my life in control and be predictable. Okay, you follow that, you now have got predictability is actually a value of yours, right? I mean, This is actually the reason for me to schedule my weeks. I had a completely negative reason for scheduling my weeks, which is I hated being behind and I hated not getting things done on time. And I finally figured out that the value was predictability. Well, predictability is a big, broad value, and there are a lot of ways to get predictability. And for example, if predictability is what you really want, you could change your living environment so that there was more predictability in your being able to pay for it. Either you could move to a place that's cheaper, or you could rent out a room, right? I mean, and if you want predictability, you can say, oh, these other possibilities now start coming to mind because what you want is predictability. That opens up. Whereas if what it just is, I don't want to get evicted, you stay focused on this apartment, this landlord, this particular rent, this particular income. It's like, oh no, this would be terrible. You can't think like that. So let's take a second reason that someone might not want to get evicted. Okay, we're going to take I'm just making these up, right? It would be cold out there, right? They're in the Northeast and it's cold out there. And well, and more seriously, I have an acquaintance of mine who very suddenly broke up with her boyfriend and then needed to stay in a homeless shelter for a couple of weeks until she found a place to live. And it was really quite she described it. It was quite scary. You have no privacy and you don't feel like you have any security. So and suppose you really want that privacy and security. Well, that's actually very, very helpful to realize that it's a security issue. I mean, security is a little bit, can be a little bit negative, but that in effect, it's a comfort issue. You want to take care of yourself. You want to do this. Well, this again, if you want to have a comfortable place to live, this then opens up other possibilities that might be more affordable, right? Let me come up with a third reason someone wouldn't want to be evicted. I mean, it seems like an obvious case, but well, how about they love their apartment? They love their apartment. They've got it set up. It's the perfect place. They have a fantastic view. They love living there. They just get such joy out of living there. Well, that actually would be a reason to hustle, to find some way to make more money, to be able to stay living there. And the motivation for making money would be, God, I love this. This is, here's $100. This is going to my view. This is I need this much money to be able to keep that view. I need this much money to keep that great kitchen, whatever it is. So you see, and people are putting other things in the chat, other reasons to not want to get evicted, hate to move, right? See, now this is threat oriented, but you need to then go back. It's fine if it comes out threat oriented. That's no problem. It just means that you have a couple more layers of analysis to do. There's one of the things sometimes people get worried, like I say, oh, you should be value oriented. And then they get worried because they have threat oriented emotions. Of course you have threat oriented emotions. There are threats out there. There are things you don't want. There are things you have aversion to, things that you fear, things that you're angry at. Of course this happens. It's no problem. This is a good thing. This is not a bug. This is a feature. We have these emotions to help alert you to values at stake. And all you need to do is you just need an extra level of processing, extra level of processing. Another one that comes in here is reasons you wouldn't want to be evicted is it's close to work and it's close to family and friends. So super convenient, right? Look at all the time you save by being in this place. That too might then motivate you to find ways to go get the money. I'm just trying to concretize this, but value orientation is absolutely critical. This is one of the things I coach people on a lot. Lynn Zinser, my head coach for the Thinking Lab, coaches people on it a lot too. It's always possible. This is what I want to tell you. It is always possible. If you are thinking in terms of threats, just think a little deeper. A threat is a threat to a value. And this is learn to introspect. Learn to introspect all the negative emotions around that threat. There will be leads to values in there. I guarantee it. All right. My tip number 2. This is on doing the payoffs. Prevent wasted time, right? There's there's nothing worse than putting on a hell of a lot of time into a goal and having, in the end, realizing that time was wasted. It's just horrible. And this is one of the reasons why I think you need to think about the payoffs. So for example, let me just give you an example. This is a real, well, I'm going to give you a fictionalized example. Sometimes big projects are designed with silos, right? I'm thinking of the shuttle. I mean, if you've read Feynman's book and Feynman's analysis of the Challenger disaster, which is fascinating, I'm pretty sure it's in Tales of a Curious Character. Really worth reading. He talks about how the design was done in parallel. So the engines were designed in parallel with, the heat things and in parallel with the fuel. And in the end, there were certain difficulties in making them all integrate together. And this is known. I mean, this is known. This is the way software used to get designed. It was called the waterfall method. Everyone would build all of the modules and then they try to integrate them. And it was a complete disaster because nothing ever talked to each other. And that's why if you are in the software field, software development these days, they do it, they have various names for it. I call it planned evolution, but they call it, oh God, there's so many names. Scrum is one of the ways that does it. God, I'm completely forgetting there's a real agile programming. Thank you very much. Yes, agile. Just when 4 people put it in the chat while I'm like grasping for that. Whoops, sorry, I inadvertently moved to a different slide. Yeah, you need to get results sooner rather than later. And this is one of the ways that you make sure that you aren't wasting all this effort. And that kind of thing can be adapted. I mean, this is what you do, like, for example, when you're writing a book. You make sure that you get an overall outline that you think hangs together before you start writing chapters. Otherwise, you can start writing chapters. I mean, this happened to me with an early book project. I wrote drafted 6 chapters.
Okay.
Whoops, I got someone.
You can mute it.
Muted. I got 6 chapters done and then realized I was a little confused about the second half. And I put all this time in, I outlined the second half. And I got a friend of mine actually to, look at it. And we realized the subject of the first half was different from the subject of the second half. And I needed to start over again. So this has happened to me in various ways on various book projects. But it really can turn out that, you really you weren't putting the effort in ways that were going to come together to get the result you wanted. And so you need to find some way to make sure that this thing you're doing now is going to be worth your effort no matter what happens. No busy work. This is very broad. Let's see, we've got actually some questions in the chat that might be relevant to this one. Joanna, if you could put in an example of where this is difficult, we can then talk about it either now or later on. Usually what this means is putting on your creative thinking cap to find something that you're sure would move you forward. And so like with taxes, this is or some administrative task, getting an overview can be a great way to make sure that you get a payoff and that you're in a better position to judge what would be useful, after the next time block. All right. Right. Or like if you want to put in an exercise routine or one of the things I would say is it, first of all, I'm going to go back. Is it value oriented? Why do you want to put in exercise? I mean, I would pick exercise that you find fun, right? I mean, for me, tennis is my favorite exercise. I actually also like strength training, but I'm a little weird. I think in that regard, I think a lot of people don't like strength training, but I like it. But, then, if I have a tennis lesson or I play tennis, it is pleasurable no matter what. If I do strength training, just having gotten myself to do this, I actually get pleasure out of that. Now, if you don't get pleasure out of that, you either need to find some other way to find some other exercise process that you enjoy, or you need to find some way to ensure that you're going to get benefits. So like bicycling, I had a period where I could not play tennis. I broke my wrist about a year and a half ago. And I had about 4 months where I couldn't play tennis. And I needed aerobic exercise. I decided the best choice was bicycling, and I hate bicycling, okay? By the end of this 4 months, I actually got so I was I actually didn't mind bicycling. But what I did is I listened to very interesting podcasts while I was bicycling. So I got a payoff every time that I put in that effort. Very important. I don't know that was a perfect example of not wasting time. I think we'll talk about that in the examples. Third tip, make the goal be about the real world. And this is particularly relevant for self-development goals. A lot of times people say, like, I mean, the thing that put me into this entire field was I wanted to fix my psychoepistemology. That is a terrible motivation. First of all, it's threat-oriented. Second of all, how do you know you've changed your psychoepistemology? You can't go in there with a scope and see how it is. The only way to do self-development goals is to find real-world goals to pursue. That is how you do it. All goals, 85 to 98% of your time should be spent achieving real-world goals. It's not that you don't do any thinking about yourself. You don't do any self-analysis. It's actually very important to do that, particularly if you hit motivational obstacles. But you do that as a means to achieve a goal in the real world. One of the things, like, I had a lot of baggage. I had a lot of baggage about needing to fix my brain. And then I had baggage about money and baggage about, all kinds of things. You can't just go and try to fix all that stuff. But what you can do is say, okay, well, I want to, like, for me, I wanted to do classes. And I had terrible speaking skills when I started. So I decided I wanted to get better at public speaking. I joined Toastmasters, and I remember my first speech in Toastmasters. This is getting on, it's like 25 years ago. It's a long time ago. And I was really, I was completely shaking. It's a 5-minute speech, 4 to 6 minutes about yourself. It's like, now you can't stop me from talking for 4 to 6 minutes, right? I mean, it's just not possible. But I was really scared. And I needed to work through all that fear in conjunction with a speech, in that case, a very doable goal. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. The old Toastmaster program was perfect. They then jiggled with it. It's not clear it's perfect anymore. I haven't been in for a few years, so I can't say for sure. But if you have some kind of self-development you want to do, you find real-world goals that are going to require that self-development. Real-world goals that, in fact, do motivate you. And then, in effect, the self-development becomes this big plus. And sometimes the self-development is the collateral gain. Actually, this is a great example for preventing wasted time. Like for me, one of the things that I'm learning to do is what Brooke Castillo calls them dread sprints. I've relabeled them as sprints because I think it's a more positive name. But it's when you have something you really don't particularly want to do, but you really need to do it, and you need to kind of get over yourself to do it, because you tend to be, like with me, with marketing, I'm like, oh, it's more important to develop the content. I want to have the relationship. No, it's really important that I actually do the marketing. And I need to actually put the time on task and deal with the emotions. And so I do a 75-minute block of time, which is unusual for me. Usually I work in 25-minute blocks, but I'll do a 75-minute sprint. And the reason will be that I really want to focus during the sprint to stay really focused on doing this, deal with whatever baggage comes up. And even if I don't get the task done, I will have dealt with a bunch of baggage, and that will be my payoff, because I will see I am learning to do these kinds of tasks with less conflict. So that would be another example of how you can get a payoff. You maybe have a development goal that gives you a payoff on a task that's not going very well. Okay, and then finally, the fourth one is particularly for mental goals. Find some way to get it out of your head and into the world. Don't just think about it. My business is Thinking Directions. My membership program is the Thinking Lab. I'm all about thinking. And you need to have real world goals. So if it's about ideas, then turn it into a written result. Make a plan, draft the article, draw a diagram of whatever you're trying to do. You can't objectively judge mental results. Oh, I had all these great ideas. Well, it turns out when you try to put them out into the world, it turns out they're a lot vaguer than you think. Or, if you have, you're envisioning, you have some idea for something, figure out how to manifest it in the world. Get it out of your head and into the world. That is, this is something I had to learn because all my goals were mental. And the way you get traction on them is putting them out in the world. That's the key. So these things, as I said, I think, let me just go back to the very first one here. Goals are so important. They're so important for your happiness. They're so important for your life, they're so important for our lives, right? It's like, if you want to make the world a better place, you got to go, you've got to achieve goals out in the world. It's critically important. So I hope that this call has given you, my intention here is to give you my best advice for how to set goals that will motivate, because then you will actually go and achieve them. You will get that outcome. You will put in the intentional effort. You will get the outcome. You will change the status quo. I mean, you guys, I want to unleash the creativity of the world, and this is a big part of it. So I hope this has been helpful. What I'd like to do is take a short break here. What I'm going to do is, during this break, I'm going to show you like the first minute or two of a promo for my launch program. It's a terrific program. If you have big goals that you want to get started on, you should join my launch program. You should absolutely join. I will coach you. I will help you set the goals that will motivate you. If you are not motivated, I will help you problem solve that, and we will get you motivated. I will help you make sure you actually achieve a major goal in 8 weeks. I'm going to take a short break, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to answer all of your questions. I will stay on until we are out of people who want coaching or questions answered. So I'm going to start this, refill my water glass, and I will come back in less than 2 minutes. So don't worry, you don't have to watch the whole thing.
The initiative was a success.
It went amazingly well.
I got what I wanted.
I don't know how it gets any better than that.
So happy.
It was the source of my happiest moment.
I want to celebrate because I've accomplished my initiative. Yay!
This is Gene Maroney of Thinking Directions. 3 times a year, we run a program called Launch, a group coaching program to help you achieve a major goal in 8 weeks. At the end of the 8 weeks, we have a celebration call. And here are some snippets of what that sounds like. June, would you like to celebrate?
A few weeks ago, you had said sometimes you really do have to fight for your values. This launch, I really learned what that meant. And it wasn't fighting in the sense of a struggle. It was getting clear about what I really wanted and having that level of clarity and love for what I want.
Yeah.
It's like the most peaceful thing in the world.
It's yourself, right? You're clear on yourself. Yeah. Fantastic. And Guy, would you like to celebrate?
Yeah, your tough love was very important there. Snapping me out of my particular thought process was really good. The self-coaching model was incredibly powerful for me.
It's great if you can come to a coaching call and get help, but it is 1,000 times better if you can do a self-coaching model at your desk in the morning and not need help. So fill it. So it goes on like that for another 6 minutes, and it ends with a slide with the link. Oh, no, it doesn't. Well, how are we going to do it? All right. It's at thinking-directions.com/project-launch/. Actually, if you just go to thinking-directions.com, you can find it. So I hope some of you will join me on the New Year's launch, which starts on Wednesday, and it's going to be terrific. It's one of the most inspiring things to get a new crop of people in on launch and find out what their goals are and get them moving. So I have several people send in goals they wanted coaching on, plus there are a few questions in the chat. So I just want to, let me start with the chat so I don't lose track of that. Yana asks, would you comment on the connection between goals and habits? Yes, So I use habit very specifically to mean a automatized series of actions, so that when you start the action, everything else follows, right? And habits are wonderful. They're actually necessary for skill. I mean, a skill is something where you can easily figure out what the next thing to do is and then do it. So you always can figure out what it is you need to do. I think sometimes people focus too much on habits, because I think most important goals are not achieved by habit. Most important goals are achieved by intentional effort and by new creativity. And habit is something that you do the same thing again and again and again. But sometimes it is an important element. So, for example, I like to talk about routines. Like, I think people have a morning routine of like the 5 things that they do in the morning after, as they roll out of bed, then they do this, and this. And it's very good to have a routine, some of which is habitual, but most of it is just a standard order you do stuff, because then you can add one more thing to the routine. And sometimes that's critical. That's like how you can add overhead. Like monitoring a goal turns out to be very important. And one of the things we do in Launch is that every day I give daily thought work for them to do. And one of the things we do in the first week is have them figure out when they can do that. They need to find some place in their routines they can put in that daily thought work to do the monitoring on the goal, so they can actually make sure they pay attention, remotivate themselves, and problem solve. Does that answer your question, Yana? Okay, she's nodding to me. Okay, great. Arthur says he has a mental goal that he's been struggling with. So several people, as I said, wrote to me about goals. Why don't you raise your electronic hand if you want to talk about this? And I will call on you. And Arthur has raised his hand. So I've got Tammy, if you're here, raise your hand. I will talk about this even if you can't if you aren't here. And Jacqueline. And I don't know if a couple of launchers. Yes, one, Susan is here. And John, I don't know if you're here, but we can talk with you also. So let's start with Arthur. Tell me about your mental goal and we'll talk about it.
So something that I've been struggling with for some time is finding some amount of peace and equanimity in my life. I always feel like I'm rushing from one thing to the next. I have to cram every minute of every day with something. It's very difficult for me to just relax, and not necessarily because I feel guilty about it, but just that it's just, there's so much that I want to do, and I'm wanting to get these things done. And if I, and no matter how much I sort of intellectually understand how important it is to have downtime and to take time to play and whatever else, it still seems like it's very difficult to just kind of relax. And I have this vision in my mind of what that could look like in real life, which is, maybe I wake up in the morning and instead of immediately rushing into all the things that I have to get done, I can enjoy a quiet cup of coffee watching the sunrise on my deck. And I've taken a lot of steps in the direction, like practical steps in real life, in the direction of helping to...
Well, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Have you ever actually walked out on the deck and had coffee and watched the sunrise or the sunset?
Very few times. A few times, but... Yeah.
So tell me what happened when you did it, because so you have an idea that this is the kind of thing that, say, you'd like to do that every day, is what I think I'm hearing. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's wonderful and it's peaceful and it's relaxing. And also there's a part of my mind that is, running a loop about all the things that I need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't actually enjoy it as much as you want, because even though you're there and there's some good features with it, what's still on your mind is all the other things you need to do.
It's a combination, right? Like, I am enjoying it, but I am also distracted. But I'm less worried about the fact that I'm also distracted as much as I'm worried about that I can't just consistently do this. Like, there are too many mornings when, I've got to rush off to my next meeting, or I've got all this stuff I got to get done before I have to leave the house, etc.
Okay. So I think this is a great example where what you need to do is you need to really question your assumptions, right? So I'm gonna say like 3 things that are all relevant. I'm not sure which is most relevant, Arthur. So one of them is you're describing a case of constant overload, where there's really too much on your mind and it's actually always requiring you to be kind of, you know, grabbing onto the things and not letting go. That's what it sounds like to me, that
That
you
is
are
correct.
actually literally a little overloaded.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, okay, I've got something. Don't fall over. You're on your machine there. Don't fall over. Overload is a dysfunctional state,
Totally.
meaning that you cannot think logically when you are overloaded. And so this means that you actually, as an act of will, need to say, hey, wait a second here. I am not going to let myself be overloaded here. And the number one thing to do when you're overloaded is to switch to paper and get whatever's in your head off onto paper and then prioritize. It is not true that you have to do all the things that you think you have to do. Some of them are more important than others, and it requires thinking to decide which are more important. Now, so that's the first thing I'm going to say. Second thing I'm going to say is you probably don't like prioritizing. Prioritizing, you know, if one of the things that causes people to be overloaded is that they have a lot of values, they have a flat value hierarchy. And I don't mean this as like a pejorative. I just mean it as an observation that everything seems equally important. But that is something that you can change. And that's something that you can choose to change. You can say, yeah, I've been treating all these things as equally important, and they aren't equally important. And so this is the kind of thing that I would recommend. As I said, you know, that there's daily thought work. This is something 15 minutes a day thinking about your priorities will help you see, yeah, I want to change my mind about how I view how important this is or how important this is. I mean, I literally did this today, Arthur. Today I did a 75-minute sprint under the heading of Gene wants to make money. And I literally put a whole bunch more rules into my email so that I will get fewer emails in my inbox, because that is one of the things that stops me from doing marketing to make money. And I literally do. I say I have to deprioritize this. If I were making, you know, if I had this big successful business, I would not be dealing with this, and this. And I automated them. And I wasn't doing that before because I actually kind of want to see all those emails. But I realized, no, I need to change my priorities here. I am not going to succeed unless I change my priorities. Therefore, I'm doing something to support that. And that is, I have to say, this particular one today was not so uncomfortable, but changing your priorities is uncomfortable. And what you need to be able to do is decide intellectually, this is more important. And then when you go to the moment where it's uncomfortable, you need to be able to do what I was talking about with self-direction, where you actually say, okay, yeah, this is uncomfortable. I'm going to take this step, even though it's uncomfortable. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to experience this discomfort. Part of what happens when you do that is you get more clear on why you feel the conflict. And that's what allows you, that actually opens you up to the emotions to be able to figure out what the problem is. I just want to say on the side, I see Tammy may have to go. I'm going to do Tammy next. Hopefully she can stay on. And we'll do hers next. And then I said I was going to give you a third thing. So let me give you a third thing. The third thing I would say is that if you really think this is important, then you need to spend some time making it of more value to you. Now, part of what you described, sitting on it's like a deck with a coffee cup and seeing the sunrise. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to romanticize this. I want you to talk about this with everyone. I want you to decide, think about how this is meaningful to you. Like what is this? Why is this view meaningful to you, Arthur?
You're asking me right now?
Yes, I am. I want you to tell me, like, make it be wonderful. Make me want to go there and be on the deck with you. Tell me about it.
So it's funny. I bought this house in 2021. Partially to move in the direction of like, I'd like to live in the mountains where, you know, there are no people and it's quiet and peaceful and there aren't nearly so many demands on my time or so much sensory overload from neighbors and whatever. And I have this beautiful view of like tons and tons of mountains. Like I can barely see any neighbors.
Hold on. You just told me why you moved here. I want to know about this view. Tell me about the view.
Well, it's I don't know, 180 degrees of mountains as far as the eye can see. It's all
What do you
evergreen.
like about it?
I don't know. In some ways, it's ineffable, but it's just the beauty of the nature, and it's quiet
Okay.
and it's peaceful and it's
Okay. So this is what my advice to you is. The next time you go out there, the next time you get yourself to go out there, I want you to put in words. You say it's inevitable. I want you to look around. I want you to see a frog and think about how great it is you're seeing the frog. I have little birds out my window. It's amazing. I see little birds running around on the lawn, chasing each other. It's really amazing. I see the plants grow. It's amazing. You look at the things and each one of them, think about how wonderful it is and how great it is. You're taking the time to look at it. What I'm describing here, I mean, it doesn't have to be this view, but this or something else that you think is the kind of thing that you want to put in your life. What you want to do is you want to milk it for the most value possible. And the way you do that is put the values in words. Notice how you're feeling. Notice what you're liking about it. Put it in words. Embrace it. Talk about it. That will actually strengthen the value. You're basically celebrating is what you're doing when you do that. And anything you do to act to gain and keep a value strengthens the value, including thinking about how wonderful it is. And so that's a way that you can get the peacefulness to have a somewhat higher value, which in conjunction with prioritizing and reducing overload will make it easier to then commit time to that. Does that make sense?
it does. There's more I would want to say to respond, but I don't want to monopolize all the time.
Right.
So I'll cede the floor to the next person.
This is an objective problem, but it's a solvable problem. So my goal in a short coaching is to show you this is a solvable problem. And if you want coaching, join the launch. We'd love to have you. All right. So let me do Tammy's in case she's still here. I hope she is. She says, I recently took a seminar that drew a distinction between outcome-based goals, like get a promotion, run a marathon, eat healthy, write a book, start a business, and identity-based goals. So, for example, instead of write a book, the phrasing would be something like, I am a writer who shares meaningful stories about my life. So now, the way that I think about this, and this is recommended in various ways. There are times when you have a goal where you actually need to change your self-image. And you need to start thinking of yourself as a writer in order to write a book. Because right now you're thinking of yourself as, like if you have imposter syndrome, I don't know if I know enough to be able to share with people or whatever. And so you need to start thinking about it in that way. And that actually is helpful for activating a context that is more positive and more value-oriented. But I do think that the actual goal needs to be concerning the output that you have. I think that these kinds of things where I am this kind of person are ways to help motivate yourself, but they aren't the goal. So the other ones she has here are, instead of eat healthier would become something like, I'm a person who nourishes my body with whole foods. So here, eat healthier. I don't think that's a good goal based on everything I've said here, but you could have as a goal to buy only healthy foods, buy only whole foods, right? Or that's not really quite a goal. Learn to like good whole foods, or learn to like nourishing food, right? And a reason for doing that might be some kind of self-love. Like, I'm a person who nourishes my body this way. And that might help, you're thinking in terms of, I'm taking care of myself when I do this, might actually help motivate you to do it. But the actual goal is in the eating, is in the changing of the diet, basically. Changing of the diet to be the whole foods. Does this distinction resonate with you at all? I think the reason there are a lot of different approaches to this is there are a lot of different aspects. You could even see that just with talking with Arthur, right? There's how do you get yourself to take the action? There's how do you decide what action to take, which is more about prioritizing. There's how in the moment to get yourself in gear, which has to do with dealing with dysfunctional states. I'm not sure if they can as easily be turned into SMART goals as outcome-based goals. Yes, outcome-based goals are more likely SMART, but I'm not pro-SMART. So anyway, so that's my answer to Tammy if she's still around. And if not, she'll hear it on the recording. So Susan, would you like to talk about your goal? Oh, she's here. Great. She says that makes sense. Those were examples from the seminar. I didn't want to modify them so you'd know what was presented as identity-based goals. Yes, exactly. So it's not a crazy idea. And I think it supplements, and it particularly supplements if, like for me, right, I'm actually doing some of this for the money goal because I'm like, I mean, I have worries in the back of my mind. People are going to think I'm mercenary, right? And it's like, that's a problem, right? That's, if you're worried, oh no, people are going to think I'm mercenary, you're not going to go out there and make money. So I need to start thinking of myself as someone who makes a lot of money and kind of living into it. This is related to what I was talking with Arthur about really getting in. And what is so wonderful about sitting here on the deck? I actually need to try to imagine some of that and get some of those, build up some of the goals by that visualization. Vicki asks, will we all get the recording? Yes, there will be, the recording takes a little while to process, but it will eventually, you will get a little later tonight. Once it's processed and it's up, you'll get a link. And Tammy says, yes, she has to run. I was assuming you were going to say we have to have SMART goals. So that's one of the things I learned today, that I have an alternative to that ubiquitous approach. Yes, thank you, Tammy. Thank you for asking. A lot of people do SMART goal seminars. Okay, all right. So Susan, let's talk about your initiative, because you're going to be in launch.
I am. I've lost track of how many launches I've been in.
Yeah.
Apparently not enough yet.
Well, they're a little addictive also, at least I find it.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Yeah.
And the goal that I have been working on comes from your 2 classes on building a daily, weekly scheduling infrastructure.
Okay.
And that really appealed to me because I find that when I don't do that, I waste time with buffering or with unimportant things or inertia, all kinds of junk. And so the way I've written my goal at the moment says I want to develop and sustain a daily and weekly infrastructure that prioritizes blocks of time to spend on my health and other major projects. And your response to that was to work at making it sexy, which I assume means name positive values that will motivate me.
Right. So why do you think this is so appealing to you? Because it does sound like this is very appealing to you. Why is it appealing to you?
Well, it's for several things. One is there are a lot of projects that I want to work on, kind of all over the map. And I keep putting them off. I keep not finishing most of them.
Okay.
And so I want to just get more done. I want to accomplish some things that have been hanging around.
Okay.
And I also want to, I want to feel more, be more in control of my time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do fritter a lot, and I don't want to be doing that. And I also think with some goals that I'm working on, especially the health goals, and of course I'm saying this right after 2 major holidays.
Right.
As consistent as I want to be.
Right.
And
It
so,
is way harder on the holidays. Yes.
It's gonna get way easier tomorrow. So those are I think probably the 3 big ones.
Okay, great. So, and just if you don't mind my making some wider comments about this, because I think this this shows some of the challenges in goal setting here. Because one of them is a productivity goal, because you'd like to get a lot done. And
right.
There's a long list of stuff. And this is kind of like what Arthur is. Arthur wants to get a lot done too. And one of the problems is that if you try to do it all at once, you get overloaded. And then that's not pleasant. And that then leads to buffering and other kinds of things. So, and productivity is, I'm hesitant to say this, but this is what I was going to say. It's a little bit vague and abstract, right? right? Productivity, like if you just found you put in, 6 hours a day in productivity, would that really light your fire? Probably not. It's the things you were doing that would excite you. Right.
Right. Well, the problem of doing that, of naming specific things that I want to work on,
Mhm.
most of them wouldn't even take 2 weeks. Most of
Oh.
them would be done in, a couple of 3 days maybe. And so I don't want a whole string of them to go into my initiative slate.
Right. Well, so I have an idea. That strikes an idea. See, this is why it's so important to actually really understand what matters. So I'm going to put this in words. Tell me if this resonates with you. You want to be able to uh, the word that's coming to mind, bat things off, right? Just boom, 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 bat something off. Like each week, bat another one of these little projects off. Am I
Right.
getting that right?
Right. I mean, some of them are longer and, batting them off is not quite the right word, but there's a lot of
Right.
them that are like that. Yeah.
Well, so this is also something that might make this a more tractable goal. Because if your goal was to find out a routine that you can do where you can maintain, you've got a lot of great health stuff that you've got working, right? I know I've been working with Susan, so I know this.
Right.
You've got a lot of meal stuff, you've got a lot of exercise stuff, you've got a lot of sleep stuff that's working for you. What if you were to try to put together a schedule that allowed you to have time in a week to bat a project off? Now, this would limit the number of projects you could do in the short term, but it means that you could see that you could get a routine where you could do that and you could get a predictable routine. Does that make sense?
I think that's mainly what I'm looking at, is to get that routine set.
Right. So, what I'm saying is conceptualize the routine so that you have each week. How many hours do you think you would want to have each week to try to get a project done? Because then the thing you would do is you would make every bigger project fit into that time block. You would break it down until it did. Is it like 5 hours? Is it like,
I think it's probably between 10 and 15 hours.
oh, that's a lot of time. Okay.
Well, let me think about that. Like 10 if I take out if I consider exercise separately, because that's several hours a week.
Well, so it's 10 hours on project-based work.
Right.
So here's my concern there is that 10 hours a week is getting up to central purpose level. Are these projects related to your central purpose?
I'm not sure what my central purpose is anymore. I've been working on a book idea that is kind of on the shelf at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem with it is that it's like everything else. It gets put in the mix with everything else that I'm not working on.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think actually the central purpose is more like uh, get my act together with all of this stuff, get in a good role, and then I can go back to the book.
So that formulation is definitely going to get you in trouble. I guarantee it. Because the get your act together is definitely comes from a threat orientation. Like I'm not getting enough done. I'm not in control of my time. I'm frittering away time. I got to get my act together. That's the energy that it comes from. So let me come up with an assignment for you, Susan, because we have a little time to figure this out. We can figure this out between now and Wednesday. Is that okay if I do that? Because here I think that a really hardcore I think a hardcore complaining task would be helpful for you. I think complaining about the way it's going now, and then using either the complaining tactic or the judge your neighbor tactic. You know the judge your neighbor tactic from the thinking lab? using one of those to really complain about the not being in control, the not being productive enough, the not getting these things off, right? And just, blast it out there. And then what I recommend in the second passes, right? I actually, the best would be judge your neighbor if you don't mind. Part of what you're doing in the second passes is you look at it the other way. And part of what you're going to do is I get out your colored pens. Every time you write a threat-oriented sentence, underline it in red. And figure out what the deep rational value is related to that sentence and write it in green on the side. Every time you mention a deep rational value, write it in green on the side. So this is something that I do when I'm really confused about how to get my motivation in line, is I do something like judge your neighbor, and I just go through, and every goddamn sentence I write in my journal, I look at it and evaluate, is it threat oriented? And I underline it in red. And then what's the value, and write it in green. And if you do that for like 4 pages or 5 pages of notes, which is what Judge Your Neighbor will give you, it starts to become clearer what the real values are. And it also starts to become clearer what the baggage is that's making this threat orientation stay in place. Because if something is really oriented by threats, there's probably some baggage associated with it. And that's causing the problem. And so part of what this exercise will do is will help you zero in on there's some self-defeating thoughts in here that are actually part of the problem. And part of what you'll get from doing like judge your neighbor, which I don't think I can explain it to the non-thinking labbers quickly. It's adapted from Byron Katie, and it's a very interesting exercise. But what you'll get is you will get clearer on, gee, some of these attitudes about myself are part of the problem. And if you're real inspired, you can do self-coaching models on those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, because I think we've got to get, there's some baggage that is making you feel like you're not good enough here. And you've actually been doing great things for the last year or so. And there's legitimate goals that you want to go after.
Right.
But it's being packaged in your mind in terms of, this isn't good enough. This isn't productive enough. So I think you need a little leverage to get that out. Okay.
Would be a really good thing. I can tell you right now to do.
Okay, great.
Great,
Fantastic.
great.
Right. We don't always solve all the problems, but we always make progress.
You always point me in a good direction.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I'm really delighted. Okay. All right. And I just want to say, I see Jacqueline is here. I am going to get to you, Jacqueline, too. If you want to raise your hand, we'll go sooner with you. I'm going to grab Ginger because she just put up her hand.
I'm sorry, I thought no one else was in line. I actually
No.
wanted a clarification from you
Sure.
because it's good. I wrote to you, difficult to identify whether your goal is avoidance or value motivated. And the reason why I wrote that is I could see I have a goal and I see there's good values attached to it. The goal, it's not nebulous. The goal is to clear out,
Okay.
finally declutter.
Right.
It's not nebulous at all, but it has all kinds of tentacles, as
Yes.
you know.
Yep.
So the end goal is positive. But some of the reasons, and the end goal is because I want to free myself. I want to feel free to be able to move around the country, or feel free to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, etc. And a lot of my baggage is stuff.
Right. So it's literal baggage.
So it's baggage. Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be hard to figure out the books, but anyway.
Okay, but hold on 1 second. Let me make sure I'm clear
okay.
with the positive here. You're saying, because you're saying feel free definitely sounds like you're constrained right now, so you want to not be constrained. But what you said is the positive, I want to be able to move. So is it, you want to be able to move, you want to be able to travel, you want to, and is it also like, what is the benefit of not having this stuff?
Oh, the sound of one hand clapping. Sorry.
That's okay.
The benefit of not having all this stuff is I feel loaded. Oh, number one, I feel loaded down. Number two, I'm old and I'm gonna die pretty soon at some point. Hopefully not soon. I'm still
Yeah,
working
hopefully
out
not
and stuff.
soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I need to prepare for that, and I don't want to have a bunch of garbage for people to handle after I'm dead.
Okay,
So
so this,
that's a motivation too, but I think this is not my negative motivation. I've got that later, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
both of those are negative, you notice. I feel loaded
Okay.
down is negative.
Yeah, too.
And
Yeah, it
I
does.
don't want to have, my heirs have to deal with all this, have a lot of garbage they have to do.
Garbage.
Right. But both of these can be converted, right? So let's start with
positive.
with the heirs. So do you
Okay.
love your heirs?
Beg your pardon?
Who are your heirs? People you love?
Oh, not particularly.
No, seriously. Okay, so it's just, they're like relatives who are not that close, who are just right. But you care
Yes,
about
some
them
are.
enough, you don't want to have them have to trouble
Yes.
with the house.
That's
Okay.
true.
And how would you feel if they just, called an estate person and sold it a lock, stock, and barrel? Would you be okay with that?
No, I've seen, because things you gather are things you care about. You ultimately, you get it in your house and then all of a sudden you love it just because it's yours. And it's got all kinds of things attached to it. And
Okay.
Okay,
So you don't want an heir who doesn't give a damn to just sell it lock, stock, and barrel.
that's correct.
So you actually love these things and you want them to have homes.
Yes, that's correct.
You see, we now have positive motivation. So I have over on my bureau over there, I have Mary Ann Surrey's gave me before she died all of the autographed books that she had. Because she wanted them to have a home. And I said, I'll give them a home, and I have them and I look at them every day.
Yes.
And it took her, and every painting, every important thing she had, she found a home for it. So that in
Yes.
the end, she had not that much stuff for her heirs to worry about. So you see, you want to find homes for these things.
Yes.
And sometimes you don't need to know the person, like some of your books. It might be that you might
Yes.
find that you could donate them wholesale to certain places where people would love those books. That might be the case. But maybe there's something that really has a tremendous amount of sentimental value. You want to find someone who's going to love this. And
Yes.
so, you might find that person in your social circle. You might find that person on eBay. You might find that, I don't know where you're going to find that person. But if you have the attitude, I want to find homes for these people before they get carted away, right? Then that's a completely different motivation. And that will also help you prioritize the getting rid of stuff. Because the stuff you don't care that much about, you can have someone haul it away. And the stuff you do care about, you can put more time in, and you can actually prioritize which ones you want to make sure get homes and which ones you want to keep until the very end because it's that important. You're going to bring it around as you're driving around. So that's really critical. You love the things and you want them to have homes. Totally different view from, do you see, from getting rid of it all? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And part of the problem of having it be as getting rid of it all is it also sounds like, well, why don't you just, give it away or sell it? That's
Burn
not
it.
what you want.
Yeah.
That's not what you want, right?
No.
Now,
that's
the
correct.
other thing you said is you feel loaded down. So
I
this
do.
is a little bit like Arthur's issue. Tell me about how you feel loaded down.
Well, a lot of the stuff that I have is, cars. You know me and cars. I love cars. And
Okay.
I married someone who loved cars.
Okay.
But also accumulated stuff. Now I've carried
Right.
that stuff with me for many years. He's been gone for
Okay.
a long time. And so I have a basement full of Lotus Elan parts. Some
Okay.
of which I identify with, some I don't. I know they're probably valuable. They have to go someplace. I have begun yesterday by simply boxing internal things, bearings and that are all okay and stuff like that, engine parts. And I gave them to a mechanic that I like, and he was overjoyed. He was very
Okay.
happy.
Great.
Yeah, it was really satisfying. Oh
Yes.
boy, I gave it to somebody who loves him, And
Yes.
other things I'll throw away. But what was your question? I got
So
all
the
carried away.
question is, why are you loaded down?
Oh, because I'm having, because it takes a lot of information, and I think I'm getting myself overloaded with trying to figure out where to put it, where to
Okay.
advertise it,
Right.
where to, yeah.
So it is, it's actually similar to Arthur's thing. And this is true. So I'm going to say the same thing to you that I said to him. Overload is a dysfunctional state. And I have 3 things I write every morning on I have my daily sheet that I plan my day on. And I write vigilance. 1, value orientation, which I've told you guys a little bit about. 2, no dysfunctional states. The most important thing that has helped my productivity is to realize that overload, conflict, blankness, confusion, these are dysfunctional states. And if you stay in them, you're basically indulging in them. I actually got this idea from Brooke Castillo. You're indulging in a dysfunctional state. The way you get out of the states is by thinking, but you need to actually say, damn it, I've gotten overloaded again. Okay, I have tools for overload. You've been in the thinking lab, think on paper, make a list, something. They're basic tools to deal with overload. Same thing with confusion. And what you do is you say, oh yeah, I'm overloaded. Well, that's not going to get me anywhere. Let's do some thinking on paper.
Oh, you mean do the work?
Yeah.
Shoot.
Well, but you see, if you recognize the dysfunctional states are unpleasant, that's, it doesn't feel good. It does not feel good. Whereas the thinking on paper, you actually solve the problem, and then you feel a little pride and confidence, and it's way better. And one of the things this will also do, you may be very overloaded because you got a lot of stuff, but part of what this will do is will get you to prioritize, right? When you get to thinking on paper, you can't solve all those problems at once. Okay, well, what's the first biggest problem I want to solve? What is the most juiciest problem I want to solve? I get to do them one at a time. Let me pick the ones I want to do first. And you now have the bigger context of, I don't want my heir to just sell it lock, stock, and barrel. So what do you most want your heir to not sell lock, stock, and barrel, right? That will help you prioritize. No, but you see, but the positive actually, but that's what a value-oriented goal does, is it actually guides you in the prioritization. Because some of the stuff in your house doesn't matter, and it's actually okay with you. If you were to get rid of it, you would just sell it. And it's okay with you if your heir does that, and it's not a problem. Right?
Right.
And that suddenly makes the problem a lot more tractable, because it's not all the stuff at once. You have a standard of which you can decide how to break it down into doable parts.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good, great. Jacqueline, would you like to talk about your goal? You're still here? You were here just a minute ago.
Who's there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Do you want me to read what you sent, or do you want to tell people about it?
Oh, you can read it. It's okay.
Okay, great. So she said, I'm still writing the book about how essential logic helps with clear thinking. Yay. And communicating through coherently connected statements, and how essential logic concretizes realistic feedback. I don't know exactly what that means, but this is all good. But here's your issue. As I get into more detail, I'm concerned about not overloading the reader's mind with the, and you said because basically the subject of logic is going against the grain already. So this is obviously a very important issue, right? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. And so why don't I read the rest of this? Should the book then treat, let's see. Should the book, I think, which I'm going to paraphrase it, and you tell me if I've got it right. Should I put fewer topics in this book and then and then write a second book? So like do the essentials and then do the others? So that people could move from fuzzy to hazy, and then later on they would get better. Is that what I'm getting right?
Yeah, from fuzzy to clarity.
Yes.
Or from hazy to,
right. But they could do it in steps. So one book would help at a time. So, so the general point here is, I mean, books are challenging, right?
Yeah.
Part of the issue here is an issue that actually came up in my book is you have a whole lot of things that you want to explain and they're all interconnected. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, they are.
So part of what you need to do, first of all, you do need to decide who's the audience. You said that you thought that logic already goes against the grain. I think you need to pick an audience that is willing to, why will the audience want to read this book?
Well, I think they have a problem with what they think about something, and they can't express it, or they are afraid that people won't understand what they are saying, or they think maybe it's not necessarily good enough, but maybe not important enough, or something like that.
Well, so what you
And
just, hold on. What you just
Yeah.
described is a communication goal.
yeah,
Did you catch that? So,
Yeah.
so this could be logic for people who want to communicate better,
yeah,
right? And so someone who wants to communicate better, if you're worried about not communicating clearly, this logic is going to help you. So you do have people who will want logic. They'll want it from the first chapter. You'll make the case that this is
Yeah.
going to help you communicate clearly. And now you have an audience. Now, it's not the whole audience in the world, but there are a lot of people who will be brought in by that. So that's the first thing, is by actually figuring out who you're writing the book for, and that the motivation is more clear communication.
Yeah.
Already this helps you delimit it a little bit. So then the next thing that I think is relevant is, if you think, let's see, what you're saying is, if it's overloading, is it overloading because you're trying to explain everything at once? Why is it overloading? Why do you think it's overloading them?
Well, I already have figured out steps they can take. First, how do you test, and then several other things. And so they get eased into getting acquainted with how it works to get clear, and how it works to interpret what the world throws back at you. You can do that with logic, and that is. But the thing is, you can go deeper on the issue, and I'm not sure that if it is going to be a first you want to be acquainted, you want to be helped with communication. I think that you don't need to go that deep, because I start with the communication.
Okay, right.
And understanding.
Okay. Well, let me tell you a rule of thumb I got from Harry, who, as I understand it, got it from Ayn Rand, which is, when you give an explanation, give it one level deeper, right? So you could go 6 levels deeper, but if you're explaining this thing, give one level deeper explanation. Don't give 2 levels deeper, because you see, and that actually does stop you, and it makes it intelligible. It gives them a wider context to connect in. Like, for example, one of the things I talk about in why you need to introspect emotions. So why you need to introspect emotions in order to make rational decisions. It's because you need to activate the full context of knowledge, right? You need to make sure that everything you know that's relevant is being factored into your decision. And the emotions are leads to things that are apparently relevant. Now that connects into epistemology. Now I actually have a theory of memory about how that works, but I don't need to say that to explain why you should introspect emotions. Just connecting it to epistemology is enough. Now in another place, I may, when I explain what a value is, I might want to give one level deeper about how memory is organized. Because then they'll understand, hey, a value is not just something out there. It gets stored in here and it causes emotions. And so I'll need to give one level deeper there. But I don't need to give my I have like a whole model of how memory develops from infancy to, the conceptual level. And it's probably not going to be in the book. And it's not going to be in the book because that would overload them. They'd like, why are you telling me all this? So,
Yeah,
so this is part of knowing your audience and knowing this for communication. They should know why you're telling me this. And one level clearer, it's so that so they don't just get, oh, this is a rule. They say, oh yeah, this is why this makes sense. And it ties to something else. Okay, good.
Yeah.
This is why this makes sense and it ties to something else. Now, is that helpful, Jacqueline? Is that the kind of answer that you needed?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think, yeah, that gives me the certainty that I can be brief and that is okay.
Yes. Well, and the other thing that I would say is that particularly for a book, I mean, this, I told you some of my stories of the book. I strongly recommend that you do a planned evolution approach, which means that you get some kind of overview of the whole book, a shorter version, right? So you need a like a synopsis. You need like a short synopsis, then you need like a 10-page synopsis, so that you can actually see how it hangs together. And part of the reason you need to do those shorter versions is so that you can see that you've got the motivation that goes from beginning to end. That you can see that if the goal is to get people to communicate better, I can see how this all fits together. And so this is, I think years ago, you took my nonfiction writing class, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
Yeah.
kind of process I recommend. And if you get overloaded in the process, then what I do is I develop another tool so I'm not overloaded, right? Another way to figure out, well, what's one way I could incrementally add the complexity here without getting myself inundated.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome. Okay, terrific. Ginger asks, am I going to do another launch later this year? I do them 3 times a year. The first one it starts usually on New Year's Day, but sometimes depending when the holiday is, it's not exactly New Year's. The second one usually starts in April. And I have the date, but I've forgotten what it is. It might be up on the website. It's a week after Easter. So Easter's on a Sunday. The following Saturday is when the spring launch will start. And then the third one starts on Labor Day. But you should join the New Year's launch, Ginger. Okay, now I had at least I had another question which I think might be worth coming. If there's anyone else who has a question or wants coaching, they should raise their hand. And I had one other that came in advance that I'm just going to say here. This person, I don't know if he wants to be identified, so I'm going to I'm not going to say his name. I have 2 high priority projects, and those are getting done at this time. I've recently taken on 7 low priority optional projects that I can work on during any free time I have. So this is a little bit like Susan's issue. These are what I'm wanting to manage, especially on days with lots of extra time. I'd like to move forward with these projects sooner rather than later. I don't want them to be put on the back burner anymore. So this is again, this is actually threat-oriented motivation, right? It's like, oh, I don't want them to be hanging around and not getting done. And he says, I also understand progress will be incremental and I'm satisfied getting a little value from them now rather than waiting. Now, I didn't catch this the first time I read it. So in 5 years, I'll be very glad I got started on all these projects. I'm wondering if these are long-range projects. These are not like Susan's projects. So my number one advice for managing side projects. So this is someone who's got his main central purpose and he's very busy. This is another person who's going to be in launch. My main piece of advice was to decide the priority order for the side projects. Because the truth is that you can't, I should have given this advice to Susan too, but I'll give her this advice afterwards. You can't really, each one of those projects will be motivated somewhat differently, right? That it's not the case that these projects are interchangeable and you can just motivate them all by get them off the plate. If one project, let me come up with my side projects. Let's see, I have several side projects going. All right, one of my side projects is corporate work, right? It's not my primary focus. It was 15 years ago was my primary focus. It's not my primary focus. The thinking lab is my primary focus. But I would like to do a little more corporate work. It's motivated completely differently from, I also have a side project of learning the drums. Completely different. I mean, totally different projects. And they are, you know, I can't just have some block of time that I use for either or. They're going to use different kinds of time. They're going to use different, they're going to need different kinds of thinking to get going. I mean, the drums I actually think is really fun, but the problem is I don't have I need to figure out how I can start getting practice in and see improvement without a big time commitment, which, I mean, we'll see. I haven't solved that problem yet because it's a side project. It hasn't gotten my attention. But it really depends what the projects are. And the other thing I would say is I would not think of them as other long-range projects. I think Susan's idea that she's got things that she could do in like a week or a few weeks, that's much better, because if you have 5 long-range things that are on your mind at all time, there is no way to not be overloaded by that. If you're trying to keep progress on, you know, 5 long-range projects, I don't think that that's possible. I think that it needs to be broken up into things that have definite stops, because otherwise you just don't see your own progress. I think that's what happens. So that's what I'd recommend, and I will make sure he listens to this, and I'm sure he and I will talk about it either by email or on Thinking Day. All right, I'll do my final pitch for launch. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. Launch is fun. Launch is really fun. I encourage you to watch the rest of that video. It is really fun. And the celebration call is really fun when we all celebrate what we did. It doesn't always, it doesn't always come out exactly as you intended. People don't always achieve the thing they expected. They sometimes change their mind partway through about what really matters, but they always get help. And it's what, I guess I'm tooting my own horn, but it's inspiring to coach people in launch, and people are inspired by the other people in launch. So I hope you'll join me. All right, with that, I'm going to declare Set Goals That Motivate completed. And thank you guys for coming. Thank you for staying to the very end. And I look forward to working with you either in this launch or some other way in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
You're welcome.